We have privilege to have some experts here to help have another discussion here on mental health. I'm going to introduce you, and you can come on up, come up this way or come up the other side. So first up, I have Diane. She's a registered psychotherapist and speaker who works with organizations to assist their employees and stakeholders struggling with stress and being overwhelmed, to recognize and discern the negative impacts of stress in physical, mental, and emotional health. In her private practice, she works primarily with first responders who have been diagnosed with PTSD. Her passion is to help people who manage stress long before they have a breakdown. Diane, come on up. So Kathryn Matheson, a certified nutritional practitioner based here in Peterborough. She's a graduate of Trent University and the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, and a member of the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners. As the founder of Kathryn Matheson Nutrition, Kathryn is a passionate advocate for the importance of nutrition to mental health. She works with individual clients to provide research and public education services to the International Society of Orthomolecular Medicine, offers corporate presentation, and is a certified Qigong instructor. Kathryn, come on up. And Michelle Nguyen is the Peterborough Immigration Partnership Officer at the New Canadian Centre here. And her work focuses on building a welcoming and inclusive community by collaborating with partners to support newcomer settlement and integration. Thanks, Michelle. Come on. Yeah, I've got 2 mics.
So I get the
You guys gonna have to share.
some long way. All right, so very excited again to have an expert panel to work through a couple of questions and discussions. And I think maybe the simplest way would be just for me to ask the question, and then whomever would like to sort of take the lead on it, we'll kind of pass the mic back and forth and go from there. All right, so leading us off, what are the roles of managers and leadership in promoting mental health in the workplace? Who would like to take that?
I did give this quite a bit of thought, thank you. So the role of managers and leaders, I think we need to lead by example. I appreciate what Jack said about, the stigma. I love what you said about psychological protection. I think that is so important. But the bottom line is, if I feel that there's something wrong and I'm not managing it well, and everyone else in my workplace looks like they have it all together, and my manager or my superiors do not seem to think that there are issues that need to be dealt with, I'm not going to come forward. And that's what I hear a lot from my patients. They don't want to say that there's something wrong because they don't feel that it would be accepted. One of my favorite examples is a police officer that I worked with who had a mental health injury and was off for quite a while, and when he returned to work, he was really anxious. There's a culture in law enforcement, very much suck it up, buttercup, you're trained for this, just deal with it. And he was really anxious about his return to work and what he felt his police chief in the smaller community and his colleagues would think. And when he returned, his police chief took him aside and said, I had a mental health injury a number of years ago and I'm still in counseling, and I recommend that you continue with therapy. It's really important. And it completely changed his level of anxiety knowing that his boss had been through this and was willing to share with him. So we need to lead by example.
Amazing. Again, an example of really top-down approach and engagement. Other thoughts on the
It has a lot to do also with the organizational culture that one creates. I had a sort of unique work experience. I had the privilege of working one-on-one as a researcher and administrative coordinator for a professor from Trent. And the culture that he created was one of respect and kindness and flexibility and open communication. And so it made it easy if I was struggling, which I was at times, to be able to come to him and have that conversation and say, I need some time, I need to take a step away for some self-care. And he understood, because he also knew that there was greater value in the work that I would be doing if I was caring for myself. And so I think creating that culture, that environment where people feel safe, being able to have that conversation with the person to whom they're reporting or with their manager can make a really big difference.
Amazing. Super fortunate to have such a good leader.
I was very lucky.
Thank you. I think my co-panelists gave some great examples, and just to add on to that, I that investing into the resources and programs outside of the workplace that would contribute to their employees' mental health would also be important. For example, leaders and managers can invest in training programs that allow employees to build their confidence, to develop the professional skills that allow them to better show up at their workplace, and just to show that they're investing them as a person, to connect with them as a human that is like beyond the workplace. I think just getting to that ground level is important as well.
Fantastic. Amazing. All right. Well, let's keep the good energy going then. So how can organizations effectively communicate about mental health issues without causing unnecessary stigma or concern?
I guess I can start since I still have the mic. At the New Canadian Centre, we deal with a variety of clients ranging from temporary residents who are international students to refugees who are fleeing persecution in their home countries. And so, and they're coming from a different variety of cultures too, where there might be stigma with talking about mental health issues, or it might be taboo to seek a therapist. So I think in order to deal with the stigma that might come with talking about mental health issues, it's important to understand the cultural context that they're coming from, what mental health means to them, and in what ways they would like to express about their concerns, but are not understood in terms of our Western knowledge and understanding. So whether it could be like empathizing with the migration stressors that they deal with, so being empathetic about the challenges that they may face when they're settling in a new country, understanding that there may be language barriers they're dealing with that prevent them from seeking access to supports and experts who may help them, or finding the resources or supports that they might need. So I think just lending a hand, having that space for them to share their concerns and challenges and to ask for help, and seeking, potentially connecting with the cultural and ethnic communities that they may be a part of, because they are the ones who know how best to reach out to them and communicate with them in a way that is culturally sensitive and can relate to them. So.
Amazing. Ask about those things you understand and connecting with cultural and local support. Amazing.
I think too, my perspective comes largely from creating some of the conditions that support good mental health as well, right? So having that knowledge of the context of the organization and the people with whom you are interacting, and also creating conditions for good mental health. So are people supported with access to good nutrition, to opportunities for movement during the workday, for exercise? Are there retreats that are happening where people have a space where they can have those kinds of discussions about the tools and resources that they might need to support their mental health? Education is a huge component of that. I'm thrilled to be here today because people don't immediately make the connection between nutrition and mental health always. I think that's improving. But education is a big piece of that. And for some people, that might be a way into talking about some of more difficult or challenging issues when we begin to create those conditions that are conducive to good mental health, and people see that that is being modeled right from the top of the organization all the way down.
I absolutely love what Kathryn said about including nutrition, because I think there are two facets here that we really want to deal with. We have been taking a very reactive approach. So when someone has been diagnosed with a mental illness, we look at, supporting them, of course we do, but we haven't really taken the time to say, how can we work ahead of time proactively to be as psychologically healthy as possible? And it's not just mental health. We seem to isolate that. Mental health does encompass nutrition, which is with Kathryn's sphere of expertise. So, and sleep is the foundation of mental health. If we're sleep deprived, we're not going to do well. There's so many facets of a holistic approach to mental health that we can look at proactively. And we do need to educate people. If I hurt my leg and had to wear a cast for a while, I don't think I'd be really embarrassed. I might joke that maybe it was a klutz, but I wouldn't be afraid of telling people, oh, I've hurt my leg and I have trouble walking. I would understand that is an injury that will heal. And a mental health injury, there's a lot that we can do to help people heal from that as well. I love Jack's car analogy. I tend to use that a lot too. There are a lot of symptoms that start off that we ignore, just like the check engine light in the car, right? It comes on, the yellow light comes on, and we go, oh yeah, I probably should deal with that sometime. So we may have sleep disturbances, we may have digestive issues, we may have headaches, we may gain or weight or lose weight that we didn't intend to, we may have heart palpitations, all sorts of things. Some of them may have an organic cause that needs to be checked by a doctor, of course. But we tend to just ignore that and think, oh, well, it's just stress, without realizing that the implications of managing stress long term can cause actual illness. So what we want to do is listen to those signals. I say to my clients, your brain is not broken. If you're suffering from brain fog, for example, or memory issues, when you're under stress, cognitive functioning gets bypassed. So your brain is not broken, your brain is sending you messages like the check engine light. Unfortunately, if the red light comes on in my car, now I have no choice. I have to deal with that. I have to pull over. That's when you actually have a mental health injury and a diagnosis. So we need to get better at accepting the fact that our brain sends us these yellow check engine lights, and we need to handle that proactively. And part of it is feeling supported and listened to and in an environment where you can say, if I have the flu, I'm going to call in sick. I can't come in today. And I know absenteeism is a huge issue, but if I'm feeling mentally unwell and I need to come in later because I need to just take some time to look after myself and do my self-care, yeah, I might be 2 hours late, but that's better than being off, for months with an actual injury. I work primarily with first responders who are all off work with a PTSD diagnosis on WSIB, sometimes for up to 4 years. When you look at what that costs to have someone off for 4 years, let's let someone take a couple of hours and go to the Y and exercise before they feel they've reduced their stress level to come back in.
Gosh, I love that idea again. It really is. There's a business case here. I know that's not really why we're all in this work, but there really is a simple way to look at it. If we make simple investments, small investments, it makes big dividend. All right, this is good. So, yes, okay, so what resources and programs can be implemented to improve workplace mental health?
Okay, I've got the mic, so I'll start. Therapy needs to be easily accessible and confidential. And I recognize that a lot of workplaces have EAP programs, which are wonderful. We just need to be careful that people really do feel safe, that this is not going to be reported back to the employer, that I went to see you because I was feeling really down or depressed, or, we have to be very careful about that. One thing I've noticed in some of the first responder cultures is when there's a crisis, they bring in a crisis management team. And my clients will say, so basically, something has happened, and they put us all in a room together, and they bring in a crisis manager who says, okay, who wants to talk? No one says anything. No one wants to be the first person to say, I've been having nightmares about this situation, or I'm really struggling. So they say absolutely nothing because they do not feel that it is a safe place to be vulnerable. I would love to see the culture change where we could be more vulnerable. But in the meantime, we really need to let people have access to therapy and other support services, exercise programs, nutritionists, to really help us manage those situations proactively and feel safe. Because if people feel safe, they will seek help.
Thanks, Diane. That's a great answer. I think a lot of it comes down to education and the kind of information that we make available as well, because sometimes it's a matter of having that information there so that people can access it and have a look on their own time in a more passive way. And that alone can be very important to beginning to take a step towards more meaningful change. My red light was on for sure. Like, I reached the red light point, I was definitely in a lot of trouble and I needed to take a step back. And so now that's a very important part of what I discuss with my clients from a holistic perspective is, let's look at all of the things that we can do to learn about how our bodies work, learn about the role of nutrition within mental health, the importance of sleep, all of those pieces. And a lot of that can be accomplished through making educational resources available and through an integrative approach to how we look at mental health. I think also accessing online resources. I do quite a lot of work with the International Society for Orthomolecular Medicine, or ISOM. They have dedicated their work to the importance of mental health and looking at nutritional or orthomolecular approaches to bringing the body back into balance. So they've created a whole series of web pages all about possible contributing factors or underlying factors and challenges we might be facing and ways in which we might address them. Again, it's passive, but it opens the door to more conversation. So having that broad suite of resources that can be shared with employees that can lead to those discussions maybe after a bit of passive reading or education on one's own as well.
Thank you. To add on to my co-panelists' examples and responses, one example is involving a mentorship program during your onboarding process if you have newcomer employees or if any new employee, because it always helps to have a buddy when you first start where you can ask questions, who may have similar experiences to you and can guide you through their experience of working at that workplace. And then they'll always have a resource to go through. And then also in terms of education, just to provide an example, at my workplace, the New Canadian Centre, during our onboarding, they emphasize that we have a culture of respect and empathy for our staff and our colleagues. But throughout my time here, we've also had monthly staff meetings that have been organized by the Wellness Committee. And at every staff meeting, there's a different topic or a different community organization that comes in to talk about the supports they provide or to give education about, for example, the LGBTQ community, or about cultural sensitivity or bystander intervention training. And all of this provides really helpful information for us to become better members of our community. And because a lot of our staff are newcomers themselves, it gives them access to all the resources that Peterborough community provides. So I think those are two examples of resources or programs that you can bring into this.
Really cool options for employers. I think that's fantastic. Let's talk about sort of measuring that effectiveness. So how can organizations measure the effectiveness of their mental health initiatives?
Right, so every time that I talk about mental health, I think about like all the other factors that may contribute to mental health. So at the NCC, we conduct a biannual survey that looks into the needs of immigrants and refugees. And I think asking about the challenges that they face, the supports that they might need, and what we can improve in our service delivery and programs would contribute to bettering their mental health and just their overall settlement and integration into Peterborough. So I think it's a matter of collecting data. But then also at the NCC, we have a staff survey that we distribute that asks about employee satisfaction and gives us a space to anonymously provide feedback on what could be better implemented so that we can better show up at our workplace and work effectively and contribute back. So.
Thanks. I think there are a number of quantitative and qualitative ways of measuring. This is sort of outside of my purview right now because I largely work on my own. But Jack, I think what you said at the beginning about involving employees in the process is really important. And if people feel that that space or environment is comfortable for them to participate in that way, that makes a really big difference. People also, I think, can sense authenticity. And if you come across as expressing genuine care and concern and a desire to create an environment that is conducive to good mental health and by extension productivity, I think that makes a really big difference. I've worked in a number of institutional environments. I've completed a lot of employee surveys. I've been in a lot of places where employee morale is very, very poor. People are ticking those boxes, but the employees sense that something is missing, that there's not actually genuine care and concern. And so I think the two kind of have to be married together in some way for people to feel like change is actually possible.
Well, I love both of these ladies have said. I would just ask, therapists are pretty well known for liking to use assessment tools. PCL and all these sorts of different things, the MMIs, we use all sorts of tools. But I do believe there are some assessment tools in the workplace that you can use as simple as measuring absenteeism. But I think what Jack said earlier about involving people is actually the most important thing that we can do. I mentioned earlier that I think mental health needs to have a more holistic approach. It's not just about mental health. And if I were working in an organization, I would actually look at what I call the 6 pillars of mental health. And I would find ways to assess and help people assess, ask them, how are they doing in these areas? One of them is cognitive. Are you feeling alert? Are you thinking clearly? Are you dealing with brain fog? Do you have any memory issues? These would be anonymous, by the way. I don't know if I want to admit that my memory is going if I'm in a job that requires me to have a good memory. But just to be able to assess on a scale of 1 to 10, or just how have things changed in the last 6 months? Are you feeling that you're doing better cognitively? Are there things that you need to work on? Emotional. How do we measure that? Are you able to express a full range of emotions? When people are depressed, for example, I used to think, until I suffered from depression myself, I used to think that when people were depressed, they were really sad and they cried. When I went through depression, I became what I would call emotionally flatlined. My kids were small at the time, I was overwhelmed with stuff, and I can remember if my child had said to me, "Can I have chocolate chip cookies for breakfast?" my response would have been, "Yeah, whatever, I don't care." I didn't cry, I wasn't sad, I was emotionally flatlined. So being able to experience the full range of emotions and being able to express them appropriately is something I've been asking people. Physical, this is a huge one. Are you feeling energetic, vibrant? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating in a healthy way? And if not, see Kathryn. Are you hydrated? Are you including things in your diet that are brain fueled? We want to know, how are you feeling physical? It's all interconnected. Are you dealing with panic attacks or heart palpitations or high blood pressure? Things to pay attention to. Relational issues. Do you feel connected? Do you have a support network? Do you feel that you belong? Existential. Do you feel that you have meaning and purpose in your life? If not from your work, which is ideal, I mean, it's ideal if your work brings you that meaning and purpose. Sometimes we don't have a career that does that, so we look for that elsewhere. Maybe volunteer work, maybe in family. But we all need to feel that what we do matters. And then there's environmental. Do we feel safe in our workplace? Do we feel safe in our home? Do we feel safe in our community? And I don't mean necessarily just physically safe. Do I feel emotionally and psychologically safe? And if we look at all of those pillars, we certainly can come up with questionnaires or ways to ask people to reflect. I hold a CEO retreat day once a year. And these are the kinds of things I ask people to reflect on and not necessarily share. But if you can have that done as an anonymous survey, you can certainly start to measure, are we moving forward in our workplace? Are people feeling overall better than they did 6 months ago or a year ago? And looking at the corporate culture, what things are happening. If you had been quizzing staff for the last 10 years, when COVID hit, all of a sudden those measures would go down. And that would not be something that would reflect on the workplace. That would be a result of what's happening out in the community and being aware of what are the other factors that are contributing to people's feeling of stress. We can't separate it. Stress in the workplace does not leave stress at work behind when you get to work. So we need to respect the fact that people are dealing with all sorts of things. Marriage problems, relationship issues, elderly parents, kids' bus gets canceled and you get to work late because you can't get your kid to school. All those things, we don't leave them behind when we enter the workplace. So we need to take a more holistic approach.
Amazing. Amazing amount of options and opportunity, and it kind of leads into responsibility and an obligation. And maybe we'll ask the panel, what are the legal obligations of an employer supporting employee mental health? What are the ethical obligations?
All right, I won't take so long with this one. I can't really address the legal responsibilities. That would certainly be for an employment lawyer to deal with. But in terms of ethical, I do think it's not just a matter of doing what is right, and I do think it's absolutely right for an employer to care about the health of their employees and do whatever they can to help them achieve optimal health. But it's also a bottom line return on investment. If I am in an organization and my employees feel heard and validated and listened to and understood and like they can express things that they're going through without that stigma, it's going to improve the bottom line, it's going to reduce absenteeism. So while it's ethically the right thing to do, I honestly believe it's also from a fiscal perspective the right thing to do.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, Diane, actually, that there is, and Jack, you have done that as well throughout your presentation, married the two, right? That we understand there is an ethical responsibility, but that also has a positive impact on bottom line. And we see that when we invest in our health and well-being overarchingly, that our productivity can improve, we feel better, that sense of purpose begins to come back. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it, that we don't separate the two necessarily, but understand that there's overarching value. Again, like Diane, I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily addressing the legal aspects, but I think it's a very good question overall.
Just not apologizing, but just explaining that when I was preparing these answers, I always thought of it within the migration context and to really come up with concrete examples. So Canada relies on immigrants to support their labor shortages, and we've often spread that narrative, and employers play a really important role in helping to integrate newcomers and help them feel like they're a part of Canada. And so I think if we are trying to attract immigrants as employees, then we need to provide a workplace that is inclusive of them and that invests in them to be to contribute to Canadian society as they would like to as well. And just an example is that recently the Ontario Human Rights Commission says that employers cannot ask for Canadian experience from immigrants because that can be considered as discrimination unless you're able to provide very concrete reasons as to why someone would need prior experience in Canada to be able to do that job. And I think that comes from just not being able to really define what Canadian experience means and allowing that to be a reason to create a barrier against immigrants from finding work in Canada. So I think there is an obligation to really provide those opportunities for immigrants to showcase their skills and contribute to Canadian society when we say that they provide value and we want them here. So that's just one example.
A really important perspective. Very important. So let's think again about this ever-elusive term of workplace culture, creating culture. So how can organizations create a culture that supports employees' mental health and reduces stigma surrounding illness?
So at the NCC, one of my roles is to develop a workplace inclusion charter, and this is a program, a recognition program, and a toolkit that has a very concrete list of actions and practices that workplaces can incorporate in order to become more inclusive, and as an employment strategy to attract more diverse employees. And so with that, there are many examples that have been implemented across charters in Canada. So for example, you can incorporate recognition that employees might celebrate different holidays, so allowing them to take cultural leave in order to celebrate that. Some people have brought in rooms where employees can go and do their, practice their religion when they need to and have that flexible time to do that whenever they need. And then also, I think investing in orientation programs that allow them to learn what it means to be in a Canadian workplace and the informal and formal roles of being a colleague or staff in the workplace too is important in order to create inclusivity at the workplace. So we're currently developing this charter. We have a steering committee and we're seeking a lot of feedback from employers, different sectors in Peterborough. So if you would like to learn more, I would encourage you to contact me and I can definitely share more. And it's just a toolkit that we're really hoping to provide to employers so that they have a roadmap and an action plan to incorporate DEI into their workplaces and really become an attractive employer for employees in Peterborough.
Thanks, Michelle, and I love the term toolkit. I think that's a fabulous way of looking at it. Can we provide a suite of tools that have to do with education, that take into account diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that people feel a part of the process and feel that they have access to resources either passively or actively. I honestly think that the passive access to resources can really make a difference sometimes to taking a first step. So maybe it's a link to some information or something that's left out in the lunch or break room that somebody can pick up and have a look at. That might be the first step. And then from there are more deliberate tools and resources. Again, we have a wonderful fabric of society that I think we can connect with and draw upon. The Ontario Human Rights Commission is an excellent example. They have wonderful tools and resources. So I think in a role in leadership, acquainting oneself with some of these broader tools that are available, how they might support you in your role as an employer or a manager, and then having a toolkit or a suite of resources and some things that are a bit more deliberate for employees as well can make a really big difference. And so my role as a nutritionist is perhaps to be a part of that toolkit, to be able to provide information to people. When people are stressed, they aren't digesting. And if they're not digesting, they're not absorbing nutrients. And our brain runs on nutrients. So there is a clear connection to our mental health that isn't obviously made sometimes. It's not immediately evident. So I think, again, just beginning to draw those connections, bring together those resources, and something that allows for passive and more active interaction as well.
Beautifully said. And I think I would just get back to what I said in the morning, in the beginning, which is change has to come from the top. And we need to lead by example. I love what Jack had said about they'll notice if you're not taking your lunch. I'm not head of an organization right now, but I do work with 25 clients a week who are dealing with PTSD, anxiety, depression. And I was telling Kathryn earlier, I feel I have a responsibility to practice what I preach. And there are times when I'm sure I focus on self-care, primarily because I don't want to feel that I am not being honest or genuine with my client. Not that they would ask, but I share quite openly that I go to the Y 4 or 5 times a week. I don't start my day many days until 10 a.m. so I can be in the pool at 8 a.m. for Aquafit. My clients all know that I am obsessive about getting a good night's sleep. I suffered from insomnia for many years. I'm a natural night person. Then I hit menopause. I mean, it was just a disaster. So it really was. So I worked very hard to become what I call a super sleeper. And anyone who knows me knows I am in bed at 10 o'clock every night. New Year's, we celebrate with our relatives in Austria because they're 6 hours ahead. I'm not kidding. 6 p.m. our time, we're watching the fireworks and the bells at Schönbrunn Castle in Vienna. I do not stay up late for anything unless I'm ill. I get up every morning at the same time. I follow all of those sleep hygiene practices that I preach, and my clients know that. Nutrition, I'm working on. My philosophy is include all the healthy macronutrients that your brain needs, and then heck, if you need chocolate as a comfort food, whatever. So my nutrition would not be stellar, but I'm honest about that too. And I just say I drink a lot of water, I stay well hydrated, I make sure that I eat the healthy omega fats, and then, yeah, Pizza Hut, whatever. So again, I think we need to be genuine and authentic as leaders, but we need to practice what we preach. I can't say, look after yourself, look after self-care, and then skip lunch and skip exercise and work 12-hour days on the computer. It's not genuine, and I think that's what people need from us, is authenticity.
I think that's so valuable. And not to steal from the panel's time, but I think that authenticity in organizations, we have research that shows leaders that come to their employees, to their staff, with that sort of, we know it all. We got it figured out, we're doing it, it's perfect, we're amazing, often is seen as unauthentic, and there's a disconnect. But when we can be honest, again, I love the honesty. There's nothing wrong with Pizza Hut, by the way, people hurt. But again, if we can be honest and say, yeah, I'm doing these things, and I'm doing this, and I'm learning other ways, and I'm growing, there's a connection with employees and organizations. I love that authenticity. Sorry, it's not my time, but I had to say it.